y'all doing this morning? Fired up, ready to go. That's great. That's great. So my name is Jay O'Hara. I'm going to tell a little bit about this lobster blockade story, and then turn it over to my new friend Sam to talk about what happened at the courthouse in Fall River just down the street at the beginning of September. On May 15th, 2013, my friend Ken Ward and I and our friend Marla assembled on the docks in Newport, Rhode Island, where Marla said a short prayer reminding us that perfect love casts out fear. We set sail on our little lobster boat, the Henry David T, and motored up Narragansett Bay to the Brayton Point power station, which I'm sure many of you have seen. Brayton Point is the single largest source of climate-changing greenhouse gas emissions in all of New England. Boo. Yeah. So there seemed no better place for us to send our little ship. We motored up to the pier alongside a massive black pile of coal that you can see here, which is now like 3 times that size. And we dropped our anchor. We dropped first a little normal boat-sized anchor, and then we dropped an enormous, large 200-pound anchor, which went over the side and tightened its chain with a bicycle U-lock around the keel of the boat, making us immovable. We then called the Somerset police and let them know that we were pursuing a peaceful, nonviolent protest against the use of coal. And then we waited. We waited for the ship to come in. Because coming up Narragansett Bay about that time was the Energy Enterprise, which is a 450-some-odd foot black hulking ship carrying 40,000 tons of Appalachian mountaintop removal coal to be burnt at Brayton Point. Boo! I like it. And we had positioned ourselves in a place that stopped that boat from unloading that coal. We were boarded by the Coast Guard and spent most of the day hanging out with a bunch of Coast Guard guys while through bureaucratic snafu and I don't know what goes on the other side of the Coast Guard that we don't get to pay attention to, but as essentially they tried to figure out what to do with us. The Energy Enterprise was able to dock kind of half on the pier and half off in a way that didn't endanger their safety but allowed them to but prohibited them from unloading the coal. And through the Coast Guard, the Somerset Police, the State Police dive team, which was sent down from Framingham to figure out what was going on, and through that luck and that bureaucratic snafu, we managed to stop that coal from being unloaded on May 15th. They didn't quite know what to do because one of the things that we were doing in our protest was that we were taking direct action, not against the people who work at the plant, not against the folks who are driving the boat, but we were really clear that the thing we were against, the thing we were trying to stop, is the coal. That allowed us to meet the Coast Guard or meet the State Police or whoever was coming to enforce the law as human beings, being able to say, well, I understand you're here to do a job and we'll be totally compliant. We have nothing against you. We're not here to pick a fight, except we are here to pick a fight with the coal. That snafu lasted, like I said, about 7 hours, at which point the Coast Guard had labored on us and forced us essentially to hire a barge to come and haul up our giant anchor, and we motored off for the day, not arrested, not charged with anything. That would come later. And we piloted our little boat across the river to Fall River and had a Portuguese dinner that could not be beat. So it didn't end there. I want to share a few kind of thoughts that I have about how we need to think about, and I think we need to think about, tackling the climate crisis. For me, I'd spent a number of years kind of wallowing in despair because nothing, even the things that I had been doing, seemed to be operating on the level and scope and scale of the crisis that we're facing. Dr. James Hansen, former top climatologist for NASA, and who was on this stage last year. Was anybody here for that? Yeah, all right. So Dr. Hansen says, and his colleagues have said, that we have to stop burning coal globally by 2030. That's in 15 years, if I got my watch right. And we are showing no signs of slowing down at this point. So we need to take large, bold action that's going to flip business as usual and put us on a new course. Up until a few years ago, the work I've been doing seemed linear in its work. We're doing very careful and hard and consistent organizing, trying to build a larger and larger movement, talking to people, having rallies and all that. But the truth is, we need to not be thinking in terms of change that's linear. We need to be talking about change that's exponential and transformative if we're going to get this done in time. So one of the ways to do that is invite you to find your way into this. If we're going to say the world is ending, which essentially it is, we need to find a way in our lives to live like the world is ending. What does it look like in our own lives if we take this knowledge in and live authentically with it? All of us aren't going to be on a lobster boat. Totally understand that's a unique role. But for each of you, I suspect there is your own personal lobster boat, a place where you are intimately connected with, that is authentically yours, that is bold, is risky, and is in line with the scope and scale and urgency of the change we need. A friend of mine says that it isn't social movements that make change, but it's contagious acts of transformation. Turned out that our little lobster boat had some transformative juices that we didn't actually anticipate happening. About 2 months after we blockaded the ship, around 400 people showed up at the gates of Brayton Point demanding its closure in a powerful, colorful display where almost 24 people were arrested, showing their commitment to seeing that plant and other coal plants around New England closed. It continued later that August. There was a big march from Fall River, right across the river from the plant, all the way to Cape Cod, the site of hopeful future site of Cape Wind. And we actually came through New Bedford here and went down to where they're now building this big ocean terminal to start building those wind turbines and setting them out into Nantucket Sound. It's pretty awesome. But it seemed that the transformation wasn't ready to stop there. And this September, Ken and I were set to go to trial on 4 state charges. And we were ready to bring in climate experts like Dr. James Hansen, as well as Bill McKibben and others, to try and argue that not only were our actions justified, they're necessary, given what we know about the state of the science. Well, as Sam is going to tell you, things didn't quite go as we expected. But I think that is the key. When we're doing things in our lives that act authentically in our authentic place, that's authentically ours, and we are living in a way that is commensurate with the truth as we understand it, it opens hearts, it changes minds, and allows the impossible to become possible. Thanks.
That was perfect. Well, Jay's timing was perfect in many ways. He was actually 30 seconds below his allotted time. So I have 30 extra seconds. And let me start by saying this. I never expected that I would be addressing a crowd this size about climate change. I figured if I was ever going to be addressing a crowd like this, it would be about what we've tried to do with gun violence at the Bristol County District Attorney's Office, or maybe the Aaron Hernandez case, but not this issue. And I think it sort of captures how suddenly things can happen. I have spent almost 8 years trying to get pieces of legislation passed to reduce gun violence in Bristol County and in Massachusetts, and yet I took a singular action on a particular day, and now I get this tremendous opportunity to try to move this movement forward even more. So here's what happened to me. In May of 2013, while I was dealing with the usual issues at a district attorney's office with 4 cities of gun violence and gang activity, of child abuse and domestic abuse and all the other crimes that come into the criminal justice system in Bristol County every year, a case came across my desk involving 2 environmental activists who had parked their lobster boat in front of the Brayton Point coal burning plant, which, by the way, the Brayton Point coal burning plant has been the largest emitter of CO2 in the Northeast over the last 50 years and has contributed to my adopted hometown, where I've been living for most of the last 25 years, Fall River, getting the following grade from the American Lung Association for air quality: F. So the case came across my desk, and I thought to myself at the time, that's an interesting case. But then back to the usual business at hand in a county-wide district attorney's office with 4 cities. Then, about 2 weeks before the trial date of September the 8th, my press secretary, Greg Milioti, called me and said, "You better tune into this case because it's coming up for trial, and there's a lot of buzz about it." At the time, to be candid with you, I had no idea about the intensity, the magnitude, and the fervor of this magnificent movement of which you're a part of, and I am now too. So I started to focus in on the case, and I've long been an admirer of Bill McKibben's and have read his articles, The Terrifying New Math, for example, which he wrote a couple of years ago for Rolling Stone magazine. And I had just happened to read the article. I wasn't subscribing at the time, but in some office I picked up the Rolling Stone with Jack White on the cover, and there was Bill McKibben's inspirational article about the march that was coming in September in New York City, and it was called A Call to Arms. And I can tell you, it inspired me. And I said to myself when I read the article, I'm going to that, and I'm going to take my kids. Because as he said in the article, if we win this fight, this is something we'll be telling our grandchildren about. So inspired by that, when I got a call about 10 days before the trial from my first assistant, Tom Quinn, and the trial prosecutor, Rob Kidd, saying, "This case is coming up, what are we going to do?" I actually was in a parking lot at the time. I went to get Bill's article, which was in my car, and I said, "Hold on one second." And I read them, the first 2 paragraphs from that article, which, as I said, at least to me, and I'll bet to all of you, inspirational. And what he said in those first 2 paragraphs was, this march is going to be a signal moment in the fight against climate change, perhaps a turning point. At least he was hopeful that it was going to be. So I read that to Tom Quinn and Rob Kidd, and I said, this is where I stand on this issue. So we need to find a resolution of this case that is going to demonstrate that. And as the clock started ticking closer to the trial and I started having meetings, what are we going to do? It was clear to me that I had 3 imperatives that I needed to pay attention to and do something about. And the first was this issue. And the second was to uphold the law. And perhaps I should say that was first. Second, this issue. And then third, the taxpayers of Somerset, who did have to foot the bill for the police overtime. And actually, the weekend before the trial was scheduled to start, in a conversation with Rob Kidd, it dawned on me that the right resolution was to dismiss, just outright dismiss the criminal conspiracy charge because, let's face it, did that action amount to a criminal conspiracy? Of course not. Then, to reduce the charges, not to criminal offenses, but to civil infractions. After all, civil disobedience, civil infractions. So, and then to simply ask Jay and Ken to foot the bill, but I wasn't sure they could. I just didn't really know anything about them. So when I went to court that day, and to my somewhat surprise, I saw, I think, well over 100 activists there in sympathy with Jay and Ken. I actually happened to walk into the building next to the courthouse with a reverend from Cambridge. He was asking me for directions to the courthouse. I said, "Are you here for the climate change case?" He said, "Yes." I said, "I think you're going to be surprised by what happens on this today." And so we go to court. The judge comes on the bench. I know the judge well. He's very punctual. He's very decisive. At the first call, the prosecutor, Rob Kidd, said, "I think we're going to have a resolution." He said 9:15. So we came back at 9:15, said, "We're very close to a resolution." He said 9:45. So I went racing around, talked to the chief of police, talked to the police, talked to the defense attorneys, and we came up with this excellent resolution, which I never thought was going to have me standing before you, have me on Democracy Now!, National Public Radio, Huffington Post, all in with Chris Hayes. But I also need to say, criticized by Boston Herald, Wall Street Journal, Jeff Jacoby. I welcome that. I welcome that. Because the fact of the matter is that the science is, I don't think there's even a debate anymore, is there? And the need for dramatic action, I don't think there should be much of a debate about that either. So, at 9:45, we announced the resolution. The judge is surprised. I can feel the electricity. There are only a few reporters there. And that's also a testament to what a new era we live in, how quickly this went nationwide. One of the reporters says, "Will you be making a statement?" I say, "Sure, when they're done." When Jay and Ken and everybody else. And so I watched from my office inside the courthouse. I didn't really hear the words, but I saw the speeches. Then I heard the singing and dancing and thought to myself, wow, this is really something. But when I went outside to give that short speech, which has me in front of you, where I really just echoed what Bill McKibben said in that article. This is one of the gravest crises the planet has ever faced. The political leadership on this issue in this country has been lacking, and others as well. I thought when I finished that short, whatever it was, 3 or 4 minute speech, I'd go back inside, go back to the business at hand, gun violence, gang activity, etc., and that would be the end of it. Then the next thing I know, Greg Milioti was saying to me, the New York Times wants to talk to you, the Boston Globe wants to talk to you, Huffington Post. So, what is my message here as I conclude? Well, my message is that the need for, just as I said that day, and as I'm saying now, the need for dramatic action is upon us. The sand is going through the hourglass. At this rate, the consequences that we're going to see within 20, 30, 50 years are, as John Kerry said, as John Kerry, the Secretary of State, said in the article he did with the British Foreign Secretary in the Globe a couple of weeks ago, the consequences, if we don't act more dramatically, will be catastrophic for our planet. So that's what we need to do, and you've started. 400,000 strong in New York City on that weekend in September. And as a politician, I can say to you, politicians pay attention to marches of 400,000 and to movements like this. And what has transpired since? The mayor of New York City said the very next day, New York City is going to be 80% renewables by 2050. The President of the United States said the day after that at the climate summit This is a serious crisis for the planet. And of course, the right then said, how could he put this in the same breath with Iran getting a nuclear weapon or the Islamic State? But he did. And then in this state, when, according to Jay and others that I talked to, the climate change issue, barely a whisper in that celebrated, highly publicized senatorial campaign of 2012. What did I see in the gubernatorial election of 2014? A front page article in the Boston Globe about where Martha Coakley and where Charlie Baker stand on this issue. So you are on the cusp of a powerful movement. Keep it going, and I'm proud to be a part of it. Thank you all very much.